Well, hello again, everyone. Uh, this lesson is going to be a little different than the others. It has to do with something that took place here uh, recently, and it just really set off some alarm bells for me. And so I just wanted to share it with you and go over it with you. And it's entitled Qatar, a free jet, and I capitalized the word free. In Proverbs 15:21, we're told folly is joy to him who is destitute of discernment, but a man of understanding walks uprightly. In Philippians 1:9, it says, "And this I pray, that your love may abound still more and more in knowledge and in all discernment." And when I heard this news below, my spidey senses just were set off because I've seen so many verses in my studies about discernment. Now, in Fox News in mid-May, I don't remember the date, it was this year, 2025, Qatar is giving a free luxury jumbo Boeing 747-8 jet to the Trump administration, actually to our Air Force, and it's sparking mixed reactions across America. The luxury jet, which was offered to the United States because of delays in Boeing's production of the new Air Force One fleet, will serve as a temporary method of transportation so that the current presidential plane doesn't have to be flown. And the value of this free jet is approximately $400 million. Now, when I read that and heard the news on that, I was really surprised. And having just finished Exodus chapter 23, verse 8 just brought me back, and it said, "You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the discerning and perverts the words of the righteous." In Psalm 26, 9 and 10, it says, "Do not gather my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men." And I'm thinking of Qatar and Hamas, "in whose hands is a sinister scheme, and whose right hand is full of bribes." And so my concern is with Qatar, the nation or the country of Qatar. And I want to give you some definitions so that this makes sense, what it is that has me so concerned, right? So here are some definitions we need to know if we're going to recognize, discern a potentially serious problem. Number one, Qatar is run by the Muslim Brotherhood. So what is that exactly? Per Wikipedia, which isn't the most reliable, but just I want to use, the world's go-to source. And it says the movement's self-stated aim is the establishment of a state that's ruled by Sharia law under a caliphate. Its most famous slogan is Islam is the solution. The group's founder accepted the utility of political violence, and members of the Brotherhood conducted assassinations and attempted assassinations on Egyptian state figures during his lifetime. Hamas, Israel's friendly neighbor to the south, a Palestinian militant group that controls the Gaza Strip, is an offshoot of the Brotherhood that continues to use violence. In recent times, the primary state backers of the Muslim Brotherhood have been, guess who? Qatar and the Turks in Turkey. Okay, so we get a picture of what is this Muslim Brotherhood? A bunch of terrorists. They've been around for decades and they've caused problems everywhere. It's the reason Egypt and Jordan won't take the Palestinian, so-called Palestinian people into their country. They've damaged both of those countries in the past. They don't want anything to do with them. Now, Sharia law, what is Sharia law? Well, this comes from USA Today. It writes that the Islamic State, remember ISIS, is a group of Sunni militants that believes in the strict enforcement of Sharia law. In a conversation with a Western journalist, a deputy crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salam al Saud, described ISIS' message to Saudi and other Arabs as being this: the West is trying to enforce its agenda on us, and the Saudi government is helping them. And Iran is trying to colonize the Arab world. So we, ISIS, are just defending Islam. Islam's Sharia law is casted from the words of Muhammad, called Hadith, his actions called Sunnah, and the Quran, which he dictated. Sharia law itself cannot be altered, but its interpretation, I don't know, fig or fidge, by muftis, the Islamic jurists, is given some latitude. As a legal system, Sharia law is exceptionally broad. While other legal codes regulate public behavior, Sharia law regulates public behavior, and private beliefs. Everything. Compared to other legal codes, this is all quoted out of these articles. Sharia law also prioritizes punishment over rehabilitation and favors corporal and capital punishment over incarceration. Of all legal systems in the world today, Sharia law is the most intrusive and restrictive, especially against women. According to Sharia law, and then we'll see the links here below, right? They throw people who are gay off the rooftops of three-story buildings, right? They may make their women cover themselves from head to toe, and they have no rights. And I'm going to list out here right out of the Quran and out of their own Bible here. Theft is punishable by amputation of the hands. Quran 5:38. Criticizing or denying any part of the Quran is punishable by death. I want you to notice how many are punishable by death. Criticizing Muhammad or denying that he is a prophet is punishable by death. Criticizing or denying Allah is punishable by death. A Muslim who becomes a non-Muslim is punishable by death. A non-Muslim who leads a Muslim away from Islam is punishable by death. A non-Muslim man who marries a Muslim woman is punishable by death. Homosexuality is punishable by death, but get this, sodomizing little boys is fine. So homosexuality will get you killed, but you can sodomize little boys. It doesn't matter. So they're obviously okay with the death penalty. Now, a girl's private part may be cut. This is in Muhammad's words, Book 41, Kitab al-Adab, Hadith 5251. If anybody wants to look it up and say, I'm making this stuff up, it's right in their own books. Girls can be sodomized until and vaginally raped after 8 years of age. That's okay with them. A woman or a girl who has been raped cannot testify in court against her rapist, or with an S, plural, which is going on all over Western Europe today, England, France. Unbelievable. A woman or a girl who alleges a rape without producing 4 male witnesses is guilty of adultery. So it's her fault. A woman or a girl found guilty of adultery is punishable by death, of course. And a male convicted of rape can have his conviction dismissed by marrying the victim. Muslim men can have sexual rights to any woman or girl if they're not wearing the hijab, the full head covering. A woman can have one husband who can have up to 4 wives, and Muhammad can have more. These are right out of their holy books. A man can beat his wife for insubordination, Quran 4:34. A man can unilaterally divorce his wife. A wife needs her husband's consent to get divorced. A divorced wife loses custody of all children over 6 years of age or when they exceed it. A woman's testimony in court, allowed in property cases only, carries one half the weight of the man's testimony. A female heir inherits half of what a male heir inherits. A woman cannot speak alone to a man who is not her husband or relative. Meat to eat must come from animals that have been sacrificed to Allah. That would be halal, they call it. Muslims should engage in taqiyya and lie to non-Muslims to advance the cause of Islam. That's probably the number one thing here that I want to get this point across. And I think you're starting to get the point. So here are some of these things I want us to think about. Some months back, Israel decimated the Hezbollah forces up north by embedding explosives inside of their pagers and walkie-talkies, right? And the story would take way too long to explain, but they were working on this for years, I think over 10 years, this plan, not only to manufacture the devices, but sell them to the Houthis without them knowing they were coming from Israel and shipping them to Hezbollah. And like I said, the plan was years in the making. And at a moment of Israel's own choosing, they set off the devices and absolutely crippled the Hezbollah forces. It may go down as one of the greatest military moves in all of history. Israel's Mossad is incredible. But my point here is this. Now, I want to emphasize this. They were able to weaponize something before placing it in the hands of their enemies. The leaders of Hezbollah handed these out to their military leaders, and what looked like a gift turned out to be a nightmare. And Qatar is a Muslim Brotherhood country, as I mentioned earlier. They're okay with assassinations. They're okay with lying if it moves the cause of Islam forward, right? So Qatar today houses all of the Hamas leadership. These guys are billionaires living in mansions in Qatar. They fund the Hamas terrorists. To me, that would make them enemies. And they just gave the United States a $400 million jet plane, which is going to replace Air Force One, which means our president will be flying in it. And in turn, we sold them $2 billion in MQ-9B drones, hundreds of missiles and bombs. This is an enemy. And then we allowed them to mediate the Israel-Hamas hostage and war negotiations. I mean, I don't, is driving me crazy. I can't believe this is happening. And then we did this because we're calling them a friendly nation. And based on what they believe and support, I wonder, should we be calling them a friendly nation? Should we sell them military equipment? Should we let them mediate negotiations with us or with Israel? Right? Understanding their hatred for the Jews. I mean, does that make any sense? Get somebody who hates the Jews and let them negotiate with Hamas, who they financially support and house and take care and protect the leadership of Hamas? And they're the ones doing the negotiating? And the biggest question of all to me was this. If Israel could pull off what they did with the pagers, couldn't Qatar do it with an airplane? And if so, then shouldn't we recognize that the plane could be equipped with advanced surveillance equipment in it? Would know that the plane could be carrying some kind of miniature explosives that would be able to bring the plane down? And should we really risk having our president flying in that plane? I mean, this just seems like common sense to me. Now, Islam, or in their Quran, it allows their followers to lie, steal, cheat, enter into agreements they never intend to keep in order to put their enemy in a position of weakness. That's okay with them. That's their Bible. It'd be like Jesus telling us you could lie and steal and cheat, whatever you need to do, just try to put them in a position of weakness so we can get our way over on them. And this is what's taken from What Makes Islam So Different. This was an article. Does Islam permit Muslims to lie? Well, Muslim scholars teach that Muslims should generally be truthful to each other, unless the purpose of lying is to smooth over differences. So if you have a difference of opinion with somebody, go ahead and lie just to kind of smooth it over, or to gain the upper hand over an enemy. Okay, so, generally you should be truthful, unless, and then you can lie for these reasons. And then there are several forms of lying to non-believers that are permitted under certain circumstances. The best known being taqiyya, the Shia name for it. These circumstances are typically those that advance the cause of Islam, in some cases by gaining the trust of non-believers in order to draw out their vulnerability and defeat them. Sounds like somebody you really want to put your trust in. Now, in the Quran 16:106, it says, establishes that there are circumstances that can compel a Muslim to tell a lie. In Quran 3:28, this verse instructs believers not to take those outside the faith as friends. So a lot of people have friends that follow that religion. And not all of the people that follow Islam, they they aren't radical. I'm not saying they're all radical, but this is what their doctrines teach. And it says you're not to take those outside the faith as friends unless it's to guard themselves against a danger. So you can befriend them if it's going to protect yourself, or meaning that there are times when a Muslim may appear friendly to non-Muslims, even though they should not feel friendly. In Quran 9:3, Allah and His Messenger are free from liability to the idolaters. In Quran 66:2, Allah has already ordained for you the dissolution of your oaths. So your oaths mean nothing, right? Make any oath you want just to get an agreement so that you get the victory over the person you're making the oath to. For today's reader, the circumstances for betraying your word are not specified, leaving this verse open to interpretation. According to Yusuf Ali in his commentary, if your vows present you from doing good or acting rightly or making peace between persons, you should expiate the vow. Presumably, whatever advances the cause of Islam would qualify as doing good. So have no problem making a vow and breaking it just so that it advances our cause. In Quran 3:54, and they, the disbelievers, you and me, schemed, and Allah schemed against them. And Allah is the best of schemers. Boy, that's really a great thing to hear about your leader, your God, right? That tell us that Jesus is the best of schemers. The Arabic word used here for scheme or plot is makara, I think it's pronounced, which means cunning, guile, or deceit. And if Allah is supremely deceitful towards unbelievers, then there's little basis for denying that Muslims are allowed to do the same. Now, I don't know how to, I think it's Shahid Bukhari, 52:269. The Prophet said, war is deceit. The context is thought to be the murder of one of their people and his 30 unarmed companions by Muhammad's men after they were guaranteed self-passage. They guaranteed to take them safely through and then butchered them along the way. In the same book, 49, verse 857, he who makes peace between the people by inventing, right, making up good information or saying good things, that's not a liar. In other words, lying is permissible when the end justifies the means. In another, it's 84, verses 64 and 65. Speaking from a position of power at the time, Ali confirms that lying is permitted in order to deceive an enemy. And the Quran defines the enemy as unbelievers. The Hadith makes it clear that Muslims are allowed to lie to unbelievers in order to defeat them or to protect them. There are several forms. Takia, if that's it, saying something that isn't true, which we would call a lie or falsehood, as it relates to Muslim identity, whether one's a Muslim or not, right? It's a Shiite term. The Sunni counterpart is mudarrat, I think. There's a kitman, which means lying by omission, right? An example would be when a Muslim apologist quotes only a fragment of a verse. Like they would say, lying is generally not acceptable and just stop there without giving you all the reasons why you're allowed to. Tariya means intentionally creating a false impression by saying something is technically true when knowing that the listener will interpret it in a different way. And this practice has a broader application. There's a maruna, means blending in by setting aside some of your practices of Islam or Sharia in order to advance others in the cause. So, taken collectively, these verses are interpreted to mean that there are circumstances when a Muslim may be compelled to deceive others for a greater purpose. And my question is, would you enter into or do business with somebody like that? Would you take a free plane from them? Someone whose religion encourages them to lie to accomplish their religious goals. I mean, I'm just staggered that our leadership would have accepted that. And neither would I. So why is our government? I would think they would know better. Another thought I have is that in the Gog-Magog war, which we've been looking at, we're told that the young lions, which may include the United States, not positive, but it could, they only complain about the attack. And if our current president was in power, I just can't believe this would happen, that we'd enter in and help Israel. We would step in if these countries came against Israel. But we don't. Scripture is very clear that all we do is complain, if that's even us, right? And the scripture says we won't. What does that imply then? It implies, number one, that the U.S. isn't one of the young lions. That's a possibility. But if we are, that the current POTUS wouldn't be the POTUS at the time. And so could this happen after his term is up? Possibly. Could his term be cut short by one of these leftist lunatics, has been attempted twice recently? Could this plane be another exploding pager event? Right? This is definitely something to think about. I wouldn't trust the Qataris as far as I could throw them. And I don't want to start a range war with all Muslims. A lot of them are decent, law-abiding citizens. But if they attend a non-radical mosque, but many today are attending the radical ones. And how do you know which one your friend attends? What they're being taught, what they're being told is okay to do in order to get you to do things their way, right? As far as being friends with Muslims, I would just ask the Lord for the spiritual gift of discernment, because this can open all kinds of doors to problems for you that you never would have imagined. In 1 Corinthians 12:10, it's a spiritual gift. We're supposed to desire another, the discerning of spirits. And Matthew 24:4 said, he answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you. So, Lord, in this age where deception is running wild, would you please equip us with the spiritual gift of discernment? We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. And I would add on, I ask for supernatural discernment on the part of our president and our government leaders, because this sounds like a really, really potential big mistake by accepting and letting our leadership fly in a plane that could very well be intended to change the leadership of our country. So that's it for this lesson. I just wanted to cover one of these current news events. And we'll be back next week with a couple more. I think continue with Gog Magog, and I'm not sure what the other one will be at this point. I've got a number of things I'm looking at, the apostasies, and it just goes on and on. So hopefully you'll be back with us next week and haven't offended any Muslim who's listening. It just, that's what their book says. And so I'm just sharing the truth. So that's it for this week, guys. I'm glad you could be with us.